Dan the Art Man's Book Reviews, Episode 83. My Name is Asher Lev, by Chaim Potok. This book was incredible. It was somehow subtle and powerful all at once. It was a slow build that ended as a page-turner. This book has some of the most gorgeous prose I've ever read. Side note, that's how people told me about the book. They said it was one of the most well-written books they had ever read. So many times, the way the author described the scenery or how the main character felt communicated volumes. It's like I wasn't just there with Asher Lev, but I was feeling what he was feeling too. His ability to communicate feelings, like the way looking at the way light hits different things, and how the main character sees the world as an artist, was exquisite. Or even how the main character experiences and notices things in the world. You are not simply passing the time with the character and watching events unfold with the character, but taking things in most people do not, as only an artist or person of great feeling can. The author is a painter himself, and he renders the unique world of Asher Lev in vivid strokes. A lot of the Jewish stuff was over my head, but it added so much to the dynamics between the characters. The way in which his art made it hard for others in his Jewish world to relate to him resonated in a big way for me. As an artist myself, I have always felt different than most other people. Most guys want to talk about sports, and I have no clue about them and am more interested in music, literature, and art. I'm sensitive and cry at any scene in a movie or show with emotion, and moving music, or when I hear amazing singing. In the way that art pulled Asher away from the world he was raised in, art pulls all artists into a bit of another world that doesn't make sense to everyone else. Without spoiling anything, I'll just say that I loved how powerful it was for the main character to discover things about himself as an artist and his gifts, while at the same time, people in his community couldn't understand his artistic gift, and some even thought of it as something evil or to be abandoned. I will definitely have to read all of the other books this guy has written. He is as talented an author as the main character Asher Lev is a painter in this novel. His prodigious prose is as pretty and rich with color, emotion, depth, and wise understanding of the world and its detailed complexities as the strokes of a master painter brush across a canvas. Yes, this was an amazing novel. It's funny too, I usually write these reviews right after I finish a book. And it's probably really cheesy to some people, or maybe just even in bad taste, but I often find myself or enjoy writing the book review with a little bit of the flavor of the writing of the book I just finished, or the author. And so I didn't really do that here. I don't think I could adequately write the way that this guy does because he's brilliant. But it's just funny when I write. I think I found it to be the cheesiest when I read a fairly old book and then parts of my review are written in a similar style and with similar language and words I don't usually use in the book review, but I think it's kind of fun. For real though, the two people that recommended this book to me mostly read books about the Christian faith. I know one of them does also read a lot of fiction, but both of them commented on how it was one of the best books they've ever read and just how it was written. One of the most well-written books. And neither of those readers were artists. So anyway, there's two things that I find incredible about My Name is Asher Lev. One, I love coming-of-age stories. And I recently watched the movie called Stand By Me, which is from the short novel The Body by Stephen King. and it's in a collection of 4 short novels called 4 Seasons, some of which were just a little too dark for me, but a little warning there. And there's a lot of language, but man, there's just something about a person coming of age that really, really resonates with me, and I just feel like make really great stories, because it is one of the biggest turning points in your life. And it happens to everyone, because marriage doesn't, but coming of age, I would say, happens to everyone. My name is Asher Lev. You get to stay with the character for a long time, even when they're very young. And so as they're discovering their talents, it just starts with sketching and drawing and charcoal work, and then it's a long time until the artist can start to paint. And even through all of that, his father does not want him to pursue art and just will never understand it, because they're very religious, and he doesn't see how this could be something his son would do, let alone the things his son decides to paint. But no spoilers, as always. So there's one thing. It's maybe one of the best coming-of-age stories I've ever read, because unlike The Body, which is one of my favorites, which, that story takes place over a few days, and that's what's so cool about it. Just the few days that they walk down these train tracks to see a dead body, and then come back and face off against these older gang kids. All of it makes them kind of become men, and it's incredible. But in this story, you're with Asher Lev from when he's very young until he grows into a man. And it's just incredible to just enjoy the rich, slow process that he goes through. Like, there's even parts, well, no spoilers. It's a process. He doesn't just, realize he's kind of good at sketching one day and then just start doing it nonstop. He has lots of other things going on in his life, and some of them prevent him from pursuing his talent as an artist. I'll just say that. So seeing all of those cultural things, which, like me, you might not be Jewish, and so they might be a little hard to relate to or understand, but at the same time, all of the character dynamics going on are just so human, and just, all humans are just very similar in these kind of universal ways that it's so easy to relate to. And so, whereas some books I just absolutely love because I've gotten to spend a weekend or some time with a character, and I feel like I have really gotten to know these characters. In this book, you spend like a good chunk of his childhood with him. I'm belaboring the point, but it's an incredible coming-of-age story. Secondly, if you're an artist, or you've always wondered why artists kind of seem different, it's really cool to see this author who is an artist himself. I've seen some of his paintings, and they're really good. Describe the ways in which Asher Lev sees the world from an artistic point of view. It's just incredibly well done, and I think you will appreciate a little dip into the mind, a window into the soul, if that's not too much to say, of this young artist as he's developing as a man and as an artist. It's an incredible read. I have since read the second one, and it's called The Gift of Asher Lev. And I didn't like it as much, but it still had many moments of brilliance. And just as I'm talking about this first book, maybe it's because in this one Asher is a grown man and he has his own wife and kids, and there's still a lot of the same interactions he has with his father, but it's not a coming-of-age story. And so for that, it just didn't grab me the same way, and you're still getting to see him struggle as an artist. And if you liked the first book, which I know you will, then it is definitely worth reading the second one, The Gift of Asher Lev. But for me, it was very good, but this first one was extraordinarily good. Easily, I would give it 5 stars, whereas I would give the other book 4 out of 5. Still very good, but... So that's really cool, if you're reading a book and you really like it, it's pretty cool when you can continue with the characters' lives into another book. And that was one really cool thing about the second one. You get to continue and see more of what happened with this guy this really cool character who becomes a mentor for him as an artist, and it was great. The more I think about it, I really did like it. I think I was just so incredibly blown away by the first book that the second one, even though it's fantastic, it just doesn't compare to the first for me. Could be different for you. Anyways, I highly recommend giving this book, My Name is Asher Lev, a read. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about here is paperback books. To be honest with you, I do most of my reading with ebooks or audiobooks, and it's been that way for a long time. But now, my preference is the paperback book. I've always loved the way it smells and the way it feels, but honestly, after doing seminary for 5 years, not full-time, that's why it took me so long, getting my master's in biblical and theological studies, I did most of my reading for that on screens, either on my laptop, a computer monitor, or my phone. It was a great system. I could highlight, I could take notes, I could easily search and look back while writing papers on these amazing books. Also, a lot of them were gigantic, huge theology books and books on doctrine and the Bible. And I'm living in Guatemala right now, so I got rid of almost all of my books before we moved here, and there's no way to mail or ship things to Guatemala. And if you can, it costs like $100, and you probably still might not get it. And if you do, it will be like a year later. So it's not worth doing. So if at all possible, I got all of my huge textbooks for seminary as ebooks. And I did a lot of reading on screens. And I love reading on screens for those reasons I mentioned. You can highlight, you can take notes. It's great. The Kindle app is great. You can have your whole library in your pocket at all times. All that to say, after that, we were going somewhere and I brought a paperback copy of My Name is Asher Lev, an old used copy I got off of Amazon before we moved here. And the technology of the printed word on the page is just such an enjoyable reading experience. It just really is so gorgeous after looking at screens for so long. I still do most of my reading with audiobooks and ebooks because it's so convenient for reading in bed, or if I am driving somewhere in Guatemala, which always takes way longer than you think for all kinds of reasons I'm not going to get into. But if I have an audiobook, then it's reading time. And so I love audiobooks. But all that to say, specifically this book in paperback form helped me realize just how much of a precious gift a paperback or hardback book is for your eyes to hold, to read. It's just visually stunning and kind of unbeatable. Now, my daughter has an e-reader. I should probably get one of those. I've used them. I had one of the very first, the Sony e-reader when it first came out, and it too was great. I loved it. But man, there's just something about even hearing the pages turn and getting to just glance at where you're at in the book. I know there's a percentage at the bottom of ebooks. I love that. They can even say roughly how long it will take you to finish reading the book. But there's nothing like holding a paperback in your hands and how good printed ink looks on a page. Even though I do most of my reading with audiobooks and ebooks, like probably 80% or more. But maybe that's why when I do read a physical book, it's that much more of a treat. Because I have to make time for it. I have to sit down and find a quiet place or have some instrumental music with me. So this podcast is all about fiction, reading it and writing it myself. But I will just also say there's a lot of audiobooks that just don't work for me if it's nonfiction. Because I need to get in there and underline things and make marks and put stuff in the margins. I need some marginalia going on. But for fiction, man, I love audiobooks and ebooks. All right, that's all I've got for you this time. In the next episode, we're going to get into a young adult urban fantasy series called Keeper of the Lost Cities that I read the first book of and enjoyed, but that my kids are just constantly reading and listening to the audiobooks of. So, it might be a good one for you to recommend to your daughters or even your sons. We'll get into it next time. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.
This podcast is brought to you by DanDanTheArtman.com, where you can find more book reviews, entries on Dan's writing journey, and links to purchase Dan's books, like Haunted House Flipper or The Case of the Missing Snowman. Music by Dan Absalonson.